I feel the need to like move my arms suddenly. But I'm really excited. That's probably why to welcome Boaz Paldi to Hopecast, which is our Library of Hope podcast. Library of Hope, for those of you who haven't come across our little, I say little initiative, it's getting quite big now, is really about looking at what a potential future might look like. And it's very easy to get caught in the day-to-day, but actually, what are we all working towards? And so we've been doing a lot of research and talking to people about where they find their hope and what their vision for the future is. And what's really interesting is I think there's so many global pockets of visionaries and people who are in their own, almost their own bubbles talking about this stuff. And Beryl, I'm really excited about talking to you because you have a global understanding and a global perspective. And I think that's super, super helpful because you get to see a lot of all the different kind of components of hope and how a vision might help humanity. So
Fantastic.
welcome.
I love the name of the podcast, first of all.
Do you?
Yeah. Hopecast.
It's really Hopecast is just such an awesome name. So yeah, so already it gives me hope.
We're here for it. And the colors, right? Like
Love the colors.
Who doesn't love a color?
We might be in black, but everything else
The
is...
microphones, oh my God.
Yeah, this is a new thing for if anyone is actually looking at this. It was actually my insistence. I was like, I don't want a boring microphone. If we're really going to have to record this, then we're going to have something exciting. So
it needed to be rock and roll.
It is rock and roll.
Right. So enough about us. Enough about the Library of Hope. We will talk a little bit about that again, I'm sure, later. But I think we're really privileged to have you and to have your time today. And as you know, I'm excited about lots of different parts of this, but I've known you now 5 years, 4 years?
It seems like a lot more.
A lifetime. And I've picked up bits and pieces of your life and how you've got to where you are and what you're doing now. And I've seen you obviously in your role, which I'm going to allow you to talk about the role that you're in right now. But it would be great to understand where you come from, who you are, what's informing a lot of this opinion. Because as I said, you've got a really global perspective. You've got lots of different components to your history. And I think that's probably a good place to start before we get into the kind of vision-y stuff.
Sure. So, I'm the Chief Creative Officer of UNDP.
Hang on a minute. Okay, we're using terminology here where, that not everyone's going to understand, including myself. So it'd be really great to know, in layman's terms, what exactly UNDP is. Can someone explain? Please explain.
This is a good question. Thank you for calling it out because I work with the UNDP, so I understand what Boaz is talking about, but it stands for the United Nations Development Programme, and I think is less famous than UNICEF or UN Women, but it specifically focuses on building a better world through finance and through kind of economic solutions. Yeah. So I love it. I think it's the largest of the UN departments, but it just means they've got a really amazing view of the world. And I think they have people in 170 countries. So they do have a really global understanding of this stuff.
I'm the Chief Creative Officer of UNDP. I run campaigns for UNDP, basically large-scale campaigns. My first big campaign was what's called "Don't Choose Extinction," that Helen Trickey was the executive producer for, and did a phenomenal job. Without her, it wouldn't have happened. But the idea of the campaign was a simple idea to try and get people thinking about the climate emergency in a very, very focused way. There is this thing called fossil fuel subsidies around the world where governments pay 80% of those subsidies go to the actual manufacturer. So that's the fossil fuel industry. When we launched the campaign, that was at $643 billion a year. So that's $643 billion in red, like in negative. That's negative impact on the climate. And they're unneeded. They're basically there to keep the price of fossil fuels down, but renewables are cheaper already, and so kind of like this makes the impression on the market that renewables are more expensive and therefore more difficult to get, and so therefore it keeps the status quo. And so essentially kind of like the only reason for these subsidies to exist, and these are the subsidies that go to Shell, who posted a record profit last year of $30 billion. So on top of the $30 billion of profit, this is not turnover, profit, they got subsidies from governments around the world so they could be richer, while destroying the planet. And so these are it's the most absurd situation in the world, but no one knows about this situation, and no one really understands it, and it's a bit scary and a bit dense. So we were charged with creating a campaign to try and bring fossil fuel subsidy reform onto the agenda, onto the international agenda. We chose to have a dinosaur barge into the United Nations and give a passionate speech about climate. His name is Frankie. You should probably check him out. Just Google "Don't Choose Extinction." It pops up immediately.
Listen up, people. I know a thing or two about extinction. And let me tell you, and you'd kind of think this would be obvious, going extinct is a bad thing. And driving yourselves extinct? In 70 million years, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
These two incredible creative directors in Los Angeles, Paco Conde and Beto Fernandez, came up with the incredible idea, and then it was up to me and Helen to execute it. And that's what we did. But what's different about Don't Choose Extinction is that it's funny. The dinosaur is modeled on Jack Black. He did the voiceover, the original voiceover. It was then translated to many languages around the world, but the original is Jack Black, and the dinosaur is a bit Jack Blackish. And so we brought a funny voice to a very, very serious issue and broke through. 2.2 billion people around the world watched the video. We stopped counting at 2.2 billion people. I mean, at that point, it was just
Ran out of fingers.
we ran out of fingers and money to count. And there's kind of really no point. And so really successful, but it was very, very focused. After that, we ran another campaign around climate that was called the Weather Kids. The Weather Kids asked 10-year-old kids to describe the weather as meteorologists, pretending to be meteorologists when they're adults in 2050. But in a childlike voice. So although they had all the tropes of meteorology behind them, maps and graphics and stuff, they were still looking at it from a perspective of kids.
If we don't listen to scientists, things are going to be even crazier when I grow up. Let's look at the forecast for 2050. Heat waves will affect 94% of children, making playing outside a thing of the past. Extreme droughts will wipe out wheat crops, killing the one food my brother eats, bread. Disasters will cost taxpayers almost $6 trillion. My parents hate taxes. Of course, all of this is caused by a blanket of heat-trapping pollution in the atmosphere that we could just, not put up there.
Now, this wasn't aimed at kids. It was aimed at parents to remind us that it's the next generations that are going to suffer the biggest price of this unfolding catastrophe that we're seeing if we don't take action. We have to caveat that the catastrophe can be avoided if we do take action. And so that was also usually successful. But really, kind of like what I am is, a storyteller. I think, telling a story shouldn't depend on any specific set of rules. I think you have to tell a story in the way that the story is best told. I think you can't, just because you're being funny or just because you're being cute doesn't mean you're not being serious. And so you have to find the best way to communicate a story. It doesn't matter what that is. And so kind of like for me, that's a lifetime, I don't know how to call it. I'm not sure it's a skill, but it's definitely something that I'm passionate about is storytelling. So that started many years ago. I was a journalist for a long time before I joined the United Nations. I worked for the BBC in my career. Started out at the BBC and then moved to a news agency called Reuters. Worked there for many years, covering a lot of disasters, wars, in a way, the worst of humanity. So, I found myself a lot in war situations, a lot in disasters, a lot in places that you wouldn't want to go willingly, and where people were suffering. And when you see that, you absolutely see the worst of humanity. Seen I think I've seen true evil. I think I've actually encountered evil in the world, in a form of a general in former Yugoslavia. But I've also seen the best of humanity. I've seen how communities come together. I've seen how the situation brings people together, and people rely on their community and rely on their friends and rely on their neighbors and come together and help each other out. And it really kind of like inspired me to believe that humanity can in fact do great things together, that humanity can come together as a community, that humanity can stop with this nonsense of nation states and divisions and hate, and come together and really act as one. And so kind of like I think, from that perspective of storytelling and the journey that I took through storytelling, I started out because I was adventurous, and people offered me to go places and pay me a lot of money to go, and I was like, yes, of course I'll go to Chechnya. Um, um, and so, but it ended up being a vocation that I was very, very passionate about, and then transferred to the idea that I can help the United Nations not tell stories about itself necessarily, because that's mostly what the United Nations used to do, but actually tell stories about what we care about most. And try and reach audiences that we don't reach, and try and reach them in novel ways, including with humor, including with with whatever was needed at the time to communicate that story. I think I'll stop there. I've gone on too long, I feel.
No, this is amazing. What are you talking about? The one question that's coming up for me, and we'll get into other questions shortly, but is how has, I suppose, being in war zones and war journalism translated to climate? Like, what's been the shift where you've thought climate is the thing for me?
So, I mean, on the 22nd of January 2013, a little human was born called Adrian Paldi, and that's it. That was the shift. I mean, I've always been passionate about the environment. I've always thought that kind of we should treat the world better. I've always thought that we should be more careful about how we treat the planet. In the back of my mind, it was always about climate. But when I was growing up, the existential threat was nuclear war. It wasn't climate at all. So I grew up with the kind of notion that there was a real existential threat that at some point there'll be a nuclear war. During the Cold War, during various very intense periods of time in that period. I didn't live through the Cuban Missile Crisis; that was before my time. But other times where you got close were very kind of like that's what informed my childhood. So I grew up with an existential threat, but it was a different existential. As I grew older and saw kind of like what humanity does to itself in a form of kind of like wars, but also what happens to humanity in when nature rebels in a way, when there's floods, when there's droughts, when there's tsunamis, which are nothing to do with climate change, but are still kind of like a phenomenon that happens to humans by nature. It's just as devastating. And so but what happened on that day was that my son was born. Adrian Paldi was born. And then I realized almost immediately that what is most important is to ensure that he has a fantastic future, that I can build a future for him that is, without the threat of a nuclear war, and without an existential threat from climate. And I was going to do everything within my power to do that. And you say kind of like that it's global, but for me it's very, very local. It's about my two sons. They're my driving force. They are what motivates me to get up in the morning. They're what motivates me to tell the stories. And they're what motivates me to try everything possible to crack this. And I am going to crack it because it's for them. It's for my sons. And so I don't know, something happened to me when I became a father. It was overwhelming. It was too much. It was insane, but it was also kind of like a sense of purpose that I'd never had before. Even though I had purpose before, telling the news from places that no one covers, which is what I mostly did, was an incredible thing to do. And I did think of it as a vocation, as something really important. I truly believe that journalism and media are absolutely vital to a healthy society. And so it was something that I was very proud of doing, and I was but this was purpose. This was true purpose. This was like me having kind of like this lighting moment of like, oh my God, these kids that are now here that I've produced, they need a future. They need a place to live. They need a planet. So I, as their father, have a duty. It's not a choice. It's a duty to make sure that they get that I do everything possible to ensure that they have a better future.
Amazing. But I mean, I think that also ties into how important storytelling is to you, because the way you look at that, like obviously you're dealing with some very serious situations, and but you're choosing like more humorous ways to tell those stories so that people can resonate with those and connect with those. And I think that's so important, because we are trying to like ignite other generations, the next generations essentially. So I'm just wondering, like, so you've seen some of the worst and some of the best in humanity. So obviously your children are your focus, but what else are you focusing on now going forward?
So I'm focusing on the idea that, so I'm singularly focused on the climate emergency. There's no doubt about it. I truly believe that this is an existential threat to humanity, but an existential threat that can be resolved. That's the absurdity of it. So, the other day I was playing with this, like somebody sent me a model of everything, I'll send it to you guys. But basically it's kind of like you get like a base point where the IPCC report, where by the end of the century, we're at 3.2 degrees rise in temperature if we take absolutely no further action.
Just quickly, what is IPCC? Oh no,
It's a really good question. IPCC?
PPCC.
Acronyms. We love
Yes.
an acronym.
Yeah.
They are the big daddies of climate change. So I think it's made up of governments and scientists. It stands for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And they have been doing a lot of reporting and projecting into the future for many years now.
Okay.
So their report is a big deal.
So the status quo just remained as it is today. And so 3.2 degrees is, of course, kind of like that's extinction. That's not even viable for humanity to continue living. It's a very extreme situation. No one thinks that we're going to get to 3.2 degrees.
Can I understand? Sorry, I'm completely interrupting you, but why is that extinction? What does 3.2? Because 3.2 still feels like a small number comparatively. Things move up and down. The weather changes by 3.2 degrees and it doesn't create a huge difference in the day to day. So how does it work?
So it's the mean temperature of the globe. So it's not kind of like, in January it's super cold and in summer it's super hot. It's all throughout 3.2 degrees hotter. That doesn't seem like a lot, but 3.2 degrees hotter means that we will have no ice caps. We have no ice caps. There's a rise in seawater of at least, 20 to 30 feet. And if we have that, we have no civilization. We have no cities. London is gone. Mm-hmm. There is no London. There's no wall that you guys can build that would somehow safeguard London from a 20 or 30 feet rise in sea level rise. Manhattan is gone. San Francisco is gone. It's like the major metropolitans of the world are gone. To think about this, power stations, you have one in London. I can picture it. They're built on water. The reason why they're built on water is because they use water to cool themselves down, right? But if there's a rise, even of like only 4 feet of water, they're toast. So we have no power. Without power, we have no economy. Without economy, we have no society. So essentially what we're looking at is maybe pockets of humanity surviving, but in a Mad Max world. Like literally in a Mad Max world. This is the dystopian future where you have kind of bands of humanity trying to scrape together an existence without civilization, without society, without community, or maybe small communities, but not kind of like, nothing as what we're seeing today of a united kind of a community of the world. So 3.2 degrees is it's a terrible outcome in every possible way. It's not only sea level rise. It's also far stronger hurricanes, far stronger tornadoes. Weather will be insane. There's a theory that the Gulf Stream might stop. If the Gulf Stream stops, Europe is a block of ice. So the consequences are, dire. There's no question about it. We live in a very, very delicate ecosystem where everything works because of certain, variables that happen to be here. The tilt of the earth, that creates the seasons, the ice caps that are only in the ice caps, the Gulf Stream. They're all kind of like things that are they're happenstance, but they create a situation where humanity can thrive, where animals can thrive, where species can prosper, and all of that is in question at 3.2 degrees. It's at question, to be frank, in less than that, but it's definitely not viable at 3.2 degrees rise in mean temperature. So you have a baseline of 3.2, which is take no action, right? But action is taken. We're seeing a transition happen all the time. So that's a very, very unlikely situation. So what we are seeing is like a much less rise in temperature. Still too severe for comfort at the current trajectory. But if you play around, like, I'll send you this model. It's an awesome little tool to play with. But if you play with this model, you can see that if you move kind of like a slider to the right and increase, for instance, carbon pricing, do nothing else, just increase carbon pricing, you see a dramatic drop in temperatures because it's a dramatic drop in CO2 emissions. And that immediately translates to a dramatic drop in temperatures and immediately translates to a benefit to humanity. So you can see that all of this is extremely doable. So yes, we've passed the 1.5 degrees. No one's arguing that point. We're probably going to reach the 2 degrees. We might even reach 2.2. At some point, we'll start bending the curve. And it's possible to bend that curve through actions that we take, through actions that our governments take, through actions that politicians that we elect into office take. It's possible. It's not only possible, it's going to happen. It is the future. That's what's going to happen. We are not going to reach 3.2 degrees. We're not going to reach 2.7 degrees. We're not going to reach 2.5 degrees. We're going to probably reach around 2 or 2.2 degrees. It's going to be pretty nasty in certain places. There's going to be a loss of life. There's going to be some adaptation that we're going to have to do this, but it's not existential. It's not an existential threat to humanity. And so what's really important is to strive towards that. But what's been happening over the last 20 years is a very, very negative narrative in the climate emergency. It's a narrative of we are all going to die. There's a cliff at the end of this road. We're about to fall off that cliff, and then we will be in free fall. And there is no way back from free fall. So once you're off the cliff, you're off the cliff, and that's it. And certain narratives have already put us on the other side of it, in the fall itself. Certain narratives have been making us head towards that cliff. But that cliff is, first of all, is far away, and secondly, it's not exactly accurate because there's so much that we can still do. There's so much action that we can take. There's so much more that can be done. The transition is happening. You've seen it in your work, Helen. Fiona, I'm sure that you've seen it. I've seen it in my work. We know the transition's high. It's not happening fast enough. It's not accelerated. It's not scaled enough, but it's happening. So if we push those levers, if we do those kind of like, in the model, it's like sliding, it's really easy to do in the model. So you just slide a little slider along. But if we slide those sliders along, we'll conquer this. And not only that, we'll create a better world for the next generation, because we can choose the kind of world that we create. And so it could be a world of abundance. It could be a world where energy is essentially something that is renewable and very, very cheap. And so,
Sorry. I was just going to say, I'd love to hear just even like one or two examples of what that looks like or how that could actually be the case. Moving away from the doom and gloom, but like obviously these positive things we can start to change and put in place. Is there like even one or two examples just to?
I mean, of course, there's examples. Like the smallest things can make a difference. It's a choice that we're making, but in order to make those choices, it needs to be collective action. We cannot work as individuals. That's the most important. That's the most important part of this. It's not. I could take a million individual actions that would amount to nothing because they're individual and they're a drop in the bucket. But if we all kind of like came together as humanity, not as United States and Uganda, and not as Norway, and I can't think of another country starting with N. Nigeria.
Nigeria.
But as humanity, as people on this earth with only one planet that are trying to work to save the planet, then we see the real action. So right now, what we're seeing is action in various places. European Union is doing extremely well with this. Others are doing less well. But it's all what it takes is for all of us to be on board. The studies clearly show that we have about 10% of humanity that are extremely active, like that are Greta Thunberg of the world. I remember that we had this slide when we were launching Don't Choose Extinction with The Simpsons. You remember that, Helen?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Ralph, how I envy your optimism. There is no Springfield 50 years in the future. With global warming trapping the CO2 inside our poisonous atmosphere, our superheated oceans will rise, drowning our lowlands, leaving what's left of humanity baking in deserts that once fed the world. And in the new Nineveh, darkness falls.
We had The Simpsons. So on one hand, you have Lucy, who is Greta Thunberg and does everything and is the environmentalist and
Lisa. Let's get her name right.
Lisa. Sorry, Lisa. And on the other hand, you have Homer, who doesn't give a shit. Are we allowed to swear in this podcast?
Yes. Well,
Yeah,
as long as you allowed it with your chief creative officer hat on, then absolutely. Tell us how
And so kind of, and then everyone is in between. So the Lisas of the world, they need no help. They're doing their Lisa thing and they're fine. Homer's, we're not going to reach Homer. There's no way to reach Homer. Like you just leave him alone. So that makes up about 20% of the population. Then we have 80% that are Marge and Bart and a few other people in The Simpsons, and they're Marge doesn't think that climate change is not real. She thinks it's real. She's just not doing anything about it. And so if we can get Marge to do something, if we can get the Marges of the world to act together collectively for the collective good, then those actions are meaningful. So I could give you examples of what I do. It's like, but it's irrelevant. I drive an electric car, but that's because I'm socioeconomically able to do that. It's like many people aren't. I choose to have electricity in my home that's renewable electricity. So a choice that I make because I'm able to socioeconomically. So not to say that you can only take actions if you're rich, but in a way, kind of what we need is for everyone to be on board. Companies can lead the way. There's lots of companies can do. They can change their supply chain slowly. They can reduce their own footprints in many ways. They can reduce the footprints of their offices. There's so much that can be done. It's almost impossible to give one example. It's like there's just so much out there that can be done to reduce our footprints, to reduce emissions, to move towards a cleaner, healthier society. So, but what's really at stake here is the everyone. It's not the actions. It's who takes the action.
I think, like the Simpsons visual representation of that is so perfect because it does show that essentially we can't be preaching to the converted. There's no point talking to the people that are already making those changes. It is about that storytelling, reaching out to those that perhaps are just on the fence a little bit, or like you say, see it as an issue, but don't necessarily know what they can do as a collective to make such massive changes. So I love that. I love that visual representation.
And I think also people that part of that narrative. That's not, by the way, kind of like I'm a believer that it's not a narrative that's happened by chance. This is a narrative that was put in play by forces that benefit from the status quo. So that narrative that we keep seeing of the doom and gloom gives us the impression that we're going to make extremely difficult, expensive choices. That choosing a better future means that we have to sacrifice massively. Like we have to kind of like, stop driving, never fly again in our lives, never visit relatives that live in Australia because we can't fly there anymore. Or just make choices that are extremely difficult to make. That's not the case at all. And so how can we build this in a way that shows that, using renewable energy is not the end of the world? You can use renewable energy and continue with your, more or less, with your lifestyle. It might cost you a little bit more. You might have to buy something less. And consumption is another issue. Could we buy less? Is it possible for us to reduce the amount of consumption that we intake? It's all things that we have to consider. So is it possible for us to do those things? Yes, it's possible. Is the technology available? 100% available. I drive an electric car. My God, my car is good. It's better than any ICE car that I've ever driven in my life. And you know what else? It's super fun. like no ICE car can be. I'm obsessed with my car, so I'll go on about it for a second. But I get from 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds.
They are fun.
You know who else gets from 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds? Ferrari. So I can drag race a Ferrari.
Basically a Ferrari driver is what you're telling us.
That's how fun my truck is.
Well, this has made me curious, actually, because you're close to a lot of technological advancements and cool stuff happening out there, and I've seen a lot of people talking about this being the era of not necessarily even new ideas, but scaling ideas. Can you share a couple of examples? I think electric cars we all kind of get, especially in the Western world. Although that said, China is obviously going mad.
I don't think it is in the Western world. I think it's cheaper now to buy a BDY car from China in Kenya that's electric than it is an ICE car.
Right. So electric cars and beyond, like what are the other innovations you're seeing that you can see creating a pathway to the future? Like, is there anything that stands out?
I mean, there's this company in Vermont that kind of like is using electric aviation, which is able to fly now from Burlington, Vermont to Boston or to Chicago on a single battery, which is absolutely incredible. It's small planes for now, but they're completely viable. So that just needs to scale. So we can imagine a future where we don't use an enormous amount of carbon to fly. Shipping is another place where you can see innovations happening, but they're not being scaled and they're not being taken up by the mainstream. It's hydrogen mostly. There's some other forms of energy that are happening. So that's huge. I see a lot of progress in carbon capture. Nothing definitive yet, but I see that as a huge kind of like push in the future for carbon capture.
Could we just get a bit of info on what carbon capture actually is? Explain, please.
Okay, carbon capture is the thing that a lot of companies and governments are talking about. And basically, carbon gets burnt off as the gases that come off when you burn petrol and diesel and coal and all these fossil fuels, and it goes up into the atmosphere and it traps within the atmosphere. And because of that, it basically warms the planet. That's where you're getting your global warming stuff from. And so it's heating the planet up by having all these gases in our atmosphere. We need to get rid of those gases. So that's what carbon capture is essentially trying to, I suppose, get hold of them and relocate them or get rid of them in some way so that the planet isn't heating up in the same way that it is at the moment.
Okay, so insanely important that we learn how to do that in the best way possible.
It's like number one priority as far as I understand.
Thank you. Thank you, Tricky.
There's an enormous amount of electrification going on across the board. It's not only cars, but it's like, the kind of the notion of electrify is happening, and all of that needs to be scaled. But what's interesting, the other day I was speaking to a fellow from a very large bank, and he runs one of their green funds. So it's a very successful green fund, and he makes the point that the green fund that he runs is super profitable. And so kind of like investors buy into it because it's not profitable, not because it's green. And that's the key to this. The key is that it's market forces that are going to do this. It's the market that's going to decide. But we can make it so that it's obviously cheaper to use electric, that it's obviously a no-brainer that if you can make a profit on an investment, you want it to be a green investment. And if that happens, then perhaps we can get the pension funds to change and we can get the banks to change their investments. And so that kind of is a whole huge, massive change that we can make by these simple acts. Imagine if all of us together decided that we don't care that the pension funds need the security of the fossil fuel industry in order to stay solvent. We demand that our pension fund go green. Imagine that. Imagine how much money would stream out of fossil fuel industry and into renewables immediately. Imagine what the world would look like the next day. And all that needs is a collective action by all of us to say, you know what? We are going to change our pension.
How does that work we touched on this actually when I saw you in New York in September, but there's like this kind of fear and hope, right? They're two emotions that we all
I'm still
hold.
drinking my morning coffee. I'm sorry.
It looks like a rum and coke.
That's
From
what it
here.
is,
Ice
definitely.
coffee. I switched to iced coffee.
He's been up all night. But like switching your pension is scary at the best of times, let alone doing it when you're investing in something that you don't understand. Like finance is scary to a lot of people. And so this kind of tapping into both fear and hope and like getting people across the line, like how do we do that? How do people, is it, I
I
can't
think it's
imagine.
a lot of education and
Yeah.
resources and making sure that people understand that it's not that difficult, that it's like, getting your pension fund to change investments is something that is doable, that you
Yeah.
can ask for, that you can demand, in fact. Getting your banks to commit to a greener portfolio is not that hard. You're the customer, you hold all the power, and they have to do what you tell them to do. So in a way, kind of like it's a myth that it's all very complicated. But it also, it's if there's a collective need for it, then the market will supply that need, as it's always done. It's like and here there's a critical point here that is my most optimistic part of this scenario, which is we know and have known for a long time that younger generations are much more likely to take climate action than us old fuckers. You guys are young and beautiful, but my generation, and so the wealth at the moment of the world is held by my generation. But we're going to die. We're on our way out, and the millennials and the X's are on their way in, and so there's going to be a transfer of wealth. In fact, the estimate is massive. It's like $20 trillion of wealth transfer over the next 20 years. So you're going to see this intense kind of like need for products, for brands, for conglomerates to cater to millennials and X's, because they're going to have the buying power. They're going to have the investment power. They're going to have the pension power. And so, and we know that's what they want. There's no doubt that kind of like, if millennials had a choice between a green investment and a non-green investment, they choose green, or at least most of them. And so that transfer of wealth is happening because we die, because humans live a certain amount of time, and then we pass our wealth on to our children or our families or whoever we pass, or our cats.
Not the cats, please, not
And
the cats.
so the transfer of wealth is really important in this whole scenario. It is inevitable that we are going to transition. It's inevitable that this is going to happen. What we need to ensure is that we take the steps now to make it so that it's still viable as we walk through this wealth transfer.
I love that you're speaking to millennials, by the way. Like the millennials get a hard rap. I feel like they're like the weird intergeneration where they're transitioning, and Gen Z are the kids changing the world. But the fact that
I think it's millennials as well. I think it is kind of like, it is my children insist on calling me a boomer, although I've missed the boomer by many, many years. But they like it because they know it annoys me. But my generation is still that generation of kind of like of essentially boomers. We're not really boomers, but we are almost there. And so but the next ones, the millennials, that's where the change really happens. And that's where you see kind of, the real need for brands to start thinking about this, for pension funds to start thinking about this, for banks to start thinking about it, for the financial institutes out there to think about this, and really kind of try and predict the future in that way, with wealth transfer in mind, not with kind of like the profits of tomorrow, but the profits of 10 years time down the line.
Does that still translate? And I'm setting you up for this question because you've not talked about it previously, but obviously the world is seeing something I don't think it's ever really seen before, in the sense of wealth being really polarized. Like there's a lot of richer people getting richer and a lot of people who aren't on that trajectory. Like with the wealth going to the very wealthy right now, will that still translate to millennials in the same way, or is that gonna?
I think so. I think there's enough kind of like, generational wealth out there that would tip the balance. I don't think that it's like, only kind of like, the richest people in the world that, what I think what's the Oxfam statistic that 50 people own 80 people own 50% of the wealth of the world. Fine, let them have it, but we still have the other 50%, and so kind of like that 50% is enough to tip the scale. It's enough for us to kind of like say, okay, these new generations, the X's, the millennials, they're gonna have that money. They're gonna demand that their products are green. They're going to demand that that companies are purpose driven. They're going to demand that they see the dividends not only in terms of immediate profit, but in terms of profit as it relates to the climate, the environment, their future, etc. So, I don't doubt that that's what's going to happen. I'm pretty convinced that it's enough to tip the scale.
Amazing.
I love that. I love your belief in the millennials and the X's. That's me, by the way. I miss the.
You're a millennial, and aren't you? Or are you?
No, I'm 49 this year. So.
Oh.
Don't whisper it. Aging. I'm loving aging. I say that from a position of privilege.
Helen
We're all
says,
growing old together, guys. That's a huge privilege.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But your belief in them is so exciting to me. Like it actually like makes my skin go goosebumpy, because it's such an exciting thing to hear someone actually have belief in the next generations. But I'd love to know where your belief kind of comes from, and like, do you have anything that backs up that belief?
I mean, what, the humans die?
No. No.
You
The
have
positive
proof?
side, the hope side of things.
I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, that millennials are gonna do right by the world, essentially.
I think we've seen a lot of this happening for many years now. I remember like a long time ago, I started together with two incredible Australian friends this thing called the Lion's Share. And the Lion's Share was this brilliant idea that they had. I didn't have the idea, but I helped them make it happen. Where animals have been in advertising human products for about 150 years, and the only entity in creating an ad, shooting it, producing it, writing it, scripting it, the media buy behind it, everyone makes a giant profit from it. Right, and it sells our products really, really well because animals are cute and they sell products, and that's why that's where they're in ads. The only entity that doesn't make any money off it is animals. So we came up with the idea that said, if a big brand uses an animal in an ad, they should contribute 0.5% of their media spend into a fund that we would use for conservation around the world. And so we started this fund called the Lion's Share.
Animals are a fundamental part of our world, our culture, our society and our language, even our filmmaking and marketing. In fact, images of animals appear in approximately 20% of all advertisements that we see. Yet, despite this, animals do not always receive the support that they deserve, until now. Introducing the Lion's Share, an initiative that encourages brands and organizations using images of animals in their marketing to donate 0.5% of their media spend to the Lion's Share Trust. Backed by the United Nations Development Programme, the money will then be dispersed across the world to save species from extinction, preserve wildlife habitats, and look after animal welfare.
It went very well. We had a lot of clients, and then it died of COVID, unfortunately, and other issues. But while we were doing it, we did a lot of studies, we talked to a lot of brands, and what became completely clear is that there is a need for them to both show purpose to their consumers. I can think of one big brand that was part of this. It was our first brand that we signed on. They make chocolates predominantly, but they also happen to be the biggest producer of pet food in the world. I'll let you guess who the brand is.
I'm going to
Um,
win that game if we play the guessing game.
um, and so, but they were desperate to show purpose for the millennials, but it was because of studies that they made. They like there is a lot of studies out there that show that kind of like millennials and X's, their point of purchase is not only price. It used to be only price, kind of like, our generation, it's like, oh, what's cheaper? What's more exclusive if you get to a certain socioeconomic status? But it wasn't how green is this product, or what's the footprint behind this product, or do they use palm oil or don't they? Or, what are they giving back? There's a big soft drinks company that bizarrely enough, uses water for its soft drinks, and bizarrely enough, they don't pay for that water. So again, I'll let you guess who that is. And so they're making this insane profit off nature without paying for it, and that's the idea here. That that millennials won't accept that. And it's studies show that over and over again, that they need to show purpose. The other thing that we found out is that for recruitment and retention, it's extremely important to brands. So, millennials are a workforce. X's are a workforce. They'd rather work for a company that has purpose. They'd rather work for a company that is reducing their footprint, because they know. But it's simple. It's not that they're this altruistic, incredible generation that's so much better than us or me. It's their future. They know that this is this is it. This is this is where the rubber hits the road.
How do we keep the flame alive for millennials? Because it's still a bit of a journey for the next 20 years. I'm excited about the cash injection I'm going to get that we're talking about. You're painting a great picture here. But outside of that kind of generation, not outside, in preparation for that generational wealth transfer, what is it? What does the next 20 years look like? Or what would be the perfect version of the next 20 years?
Progressive governments are elected everywhere in the world. They enact legislation that creates a situation where carbon pricing is extreme. We move away from the fossil fuel industry, and we move towards renewables, renewable energy. There's a ton of money that's put into carbon capture, and we capture an enormous amount of money without hurting our planet, because there's all kinds of schemes out there that are going to be bad for us if we continue down that path. And we leave no one behind. It's very, very important to realize that the world is ginormous. With how many of us are there in the world right now? Like I think it's 8 billion.
We're going on for 8 billion. Yeah.
We're going on 8 billion, and many of us live in societies that are less wealthy than other societies, and have less choice and have less opportunity. And the future that I see that could be this incredible future is making sure that future is realized everywhere. That it's not realized only in New York and London, but it's realized in New York and London and Jakarta and Nairobi. That it's really kind of like, it is about everyone. That it's about humanity, and it's about kind of equality, and it's about the fact that we can create a world where there is equality, where there's abundance, where we can make sure that no one goes hungry. And if we could stop wars, that would be awesome too. It seems unlikely at the moment, but if we're looking at the environment, there's a path forward, and that path starts today. It started yesterday. It started the day before yesterday. But every day we have to walk on that path. And what's really important is to try and get everyone on that path, because it's no point in just me walking on that path by myself. As I said before, it's collective action. We all have to hold hands and walk down this path together.
I love all this, and it makes me curious about what a better world looks like. What happens, or what does it look like if we get this right? Like, what's in your head?
Isn't it kind of, it's so wonderful to imagine that. It's just such a great exercise. For some reason, I think, we always can imagine the worst. We worry about the worst. We kind of imagine a dystopian world, but we never stop to imagine what happens if we get this right. And to me, what that looks like is really kind of like a world of abundance, a world where energy is cheap, where everyone has equal opportunity, but everyone is equal, where there's no need for African migrants to take this horrible journey that's so costly in lives and so dangerous in so many ways to be refugees in Europe, because Africa is prosperous, because Africa has all the opportunities there, and people can stay in their own locales and be successful and have the opportunity, have education, have the energy to operate freely, have abundance of healthcare, have abundance of food. We can imagine a world where no one is hungry, where no one needs anything, where we can concentrate on what humanity should really be thinking about, which is, how to make fantastic art. Let's make more awesome films. Let's make more great television. Let's tell more stories. But let's not worry about the money behind it. Let's not worry about it. Let's just do this for the sake of doing. Wouldn't that be an amazing world? That's what I want. That's the future that I want for my sons. I want them to be able to play jazz instruments because they feel like it and not for a living. I want them to be able to get the best education possible if they feel like an education, but they wouldn't be necessarily need to get an education because that's what society demands. I want them to be free. I want them to be equal to everyone else in the world, but I want everyone there. I want everyone to be part of this. I want to leave no one behind, that there is abundance, but there is equality.
Goosebumps. I've got a goosebump, and I love.
We can do it. We can get there.
And I've never really thought about the fact that we can raise the bar to a certain level that everybody has got like, we talk about equality and equity specifically, and it's like, oh yeah, whatever, like everyone has equal access to the starting line, but actually the fact that if we can get everyone to a certain place, it just means everybody has a better life, better opportunities, and we're not all doing all of the things scrambling around like we are at the moment, playing a musical instrument just because you want to.
Isn't that amazing? That's the world that we could create. That's the world that's out there. Because humanity, we're so clever. We're so this comes back to kind of like, the beginning of the conversation. But there's nothing that we can't do. Like we're such an incredible species. Look where we got to in such a short time. Look, now we have AI. We don't really need to do anything because kind of like AI does everything for us anyway. So it's in such a short time, and we're so capable, and we're so. It's just we're incredible. We're incredible. We're an incredible species. We took a wrong turn. We need to course correct. We need to be better. We need to treat our environment with more respect. But other than that, oh my God, what a phenomenal species that we're part of that can reach that level of basically of abundance, of everyone being equal, everyone having enough for them to just enjoy life.
Amazing.
It's so cool, like considering everything you've seen in the world and experienced in the world as well, Boaz, like to still have that optimism and that sense of joy and hope for humanity and just the world as it is and what it can be is just like, it's insanely inspiring.
I might just be insane though. That's how
It's possible.
That's possible.
I mean, that's cool too. Right. Well, thank you. We've used enough of your time while you're out saving the world for your day job, which I think we all really appreciate. I mean, the things for me that really sung true, I suppose, are the possibilities for the next 20 years, the next generation being crucial to that, and the actual transfer of wealth, the innovation that already exists and the scaling of that, and hope, right? Like actually keeping hope alive, because if we're not doing that, then the rest of it kind of falls on its face. So
Definitely.
Absolutely. It's so important to keep hope alive.
Yeah.
Because we all have a say in this. We can all be part of the solution. We don't have to stand by. We don't have to be spectators. We're part of the story.
Yeah. I'm excited to be part of your story and this story and the bigger picture. So thank you for everything.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, Boaz.
Thank
Pleasure.
you.
Thank you. Enjoy the weekend.
Thanks for listening to the Hopecast, a podcast by Library of Hope. If you want to explore more stories of imagined futures, visit libraryofhope.world. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Spotify, or YouTube, wherever you're joining us from. We'll be back with more conversations soon. Thanks again to our guest and to you for tuning in. Stay hopeful, stay curious.